We all recognize this as a Kiddush cup. Making Kiddush on Friday night, Saturday, make it, some does that for the Shalishudis, for the third meal, holidays. The question is that biblical or rabbinic? Furthermore, as far as drinking, who is obligated to drink the Kiddush and how much? Can I make the blessing over the Kiddush and ask someone else to do it? Or by spreading some wine or grape juice from the Kiddush cup? Is again, what's behind that? So that's going to be part of our discussion today. We are on Tractate Eiruvin, page 79, at the Mishnah. The Mishnah dealing with anything that divided between two domains, two courtyards. If you remember, we discussed in the past a different situation when they need to have two separate Eruvin versus when they need to have just one to combine both residents in two different domains. So the Mishnah said, "Matben sheben shte chatzerot gavoa 10 tfachim me'arvin shnayim ben me'arvin echad." If you have a haystack that it's divided throughout the entire 2 yards, if the height is a 10 handbreadth, so people in the yard, they have to have 2 separate Eruvin to each and every yard, and they cannot make one for both. So again, in that sense, this halacha in regard to courtyard is no differentiate between using a wall or using a haystack. Now, elu ma'achilin mikan ve'elu ma'achilin mikan. So, since we said that the haystack is like a partition between the two entities, so they said, if you have a situation of people in 2 yards, let's call them domain A and domain B. So people in the courtyard of domain A, they want to feed the animals at that haystack, and the same apply the other side of the haystack. So they said that each and every one can use their part, which means the haystack is in between, and people from A domain and B domain, they can feed their animals from their side. Now, the concern is, if the animals eat this haystack, this length, which remember we said many times the requirement is a 10 handbreadth, it may reduce by eating it. So there are several points here. Number one, most of the sages hold that the chances for that to happen is a very rare, which means it's not going to happen in a regular manner. Because Rashi said, for example, that it's very unlikely to see the animals eating in such a large amount that they reduce the heights. But the Mishnah concluded and said, "Nitma'et hateven me'asara tfachim, me'arvin echad ve'me'arvin shnayim." But if it really happened that during Shabbat the haystack reduced from a 10 handbreadth, so it means that for the entire, Rashi said, the entire haystack, there is a reduction of the heights, and so therefore we go by just one and not 2. Now, Rashi wants to emphasize that if that happened before Shabbat, then we can make 1 Eruv. But he wants to emphasize that we should not misconstrue that point, that if it happens already during Shabbat, because during Shabbat we cannot do an Eruv, and the whole concept is as long as it happens before Shabbat, so you can go ahead and make this Eruv. But if it's during Shabbat, then it's already done.
The 2 Eruvin become invalid, and you can't join into a new Eruv because it's Shabbat.
It's a Shabbat, and that's it. So, but according to the way that Rashi described it, it's very rare to see the situation that animals eat in such a level that they eat it and it's reduced. But now we go to the Gemara. The Gemara really elaborates on that. Amar Rav Huna, ובלבד שלא ייתן לתוך קופתו ויאכיל. Rav Huna said that the condition is as long as he's not put it in his basket and feed the animals. So the big concern is that he basically taking some of this haystack, he reduce the heights, and therefore the mechitza, the partition of 10 handbreadth, is no longer in that side. Now, I must say that not everyone go that way. For example, there is a Talmud Yerushalmi that goes in a very strong language and said that the whole idea of feeding animals on Shabbat, he said it's indeed permitted to feed an animal on Shabbat, and he even permitted to place hay into a basket and give it to the animal, as can be inferred from the phrase that he said that they may feed. The Rosh said that all these statements in the Mishnah is apply only to weekday, because he said that even though the hay is requiring for a petition on Shabbat, the residents doesn't need to concern about this eventually on a weekday, whether they may feed the animals from the haystack. So again, depend how you take it. But anyway, the Gemara said, "V'leukmei shalei." So what you're saying here, that basically it's permitted to stand one's animal next to a haystack and eat it. So again, depend how you go. If you go by the Rashi's way, that he said that maybe it's reduced the shi'ur mechitza, the level of the partition, and therefore they carry in a way that is prohibited. So they said, the Rashba said, in the name of Ravid, he said that since the whole idea of heter is only b'diavad, it's not that we wish to, it's only by force of circumstance. So therefore, we have to be careful in initio to reduce from the level of the partition. Is another way that the Chazon Ish goes, and he said that the fear is that he may call that haystack a partition for the future Shabbatot, which means if one time something happened, it's one time, but the minute you establish a pattern, there's an issue here.
Okay.
So they said, אמר רב הונא ואמר חנינא מרעין אדם בהמתו על גבי עשבים בשבת, ואין מעבין אדם בהמתו על גבי מוקצה בשבת. So he said, a person can put his animal on top of the grass on Shabbat. So we don't concern that he maybe uprooted some of the grass to feed his animals, because a person knows that this is the alright, that's a biblical. It's called kotzer, cutting off something that it's already rooted. So you know that Rashi said that it's very unlikely for people to do such a thing. But when it's come to muktzeh, something that's set aside, for example, hay, or things like that, that you need it for constructions purposes, Rabbi Yonatan said that this is something that, because muktzeh, the set aside, is rabbinic, and people can sometimes belittle it or not be aware of that. So we are concerned that he may forget and he maybe come and give it to his animals. Therefore, the prohibition against taking this hay, it's rabbinic. So they basically put the boundaries, and they said you cannot put the animals in that spot that it's muktzeh.
Now, since they essentially are using that as a partition,
only for that Shabbat, for that circumstance.
For that Shabbat, so it's not muktzeh on that Shabbat because it's used for Shabbat.
Only b'diavad.
Okay.
but basically.
But the purpose was not intended to feed the animal. It was.
Yes.
Yeah.
But basically, the way that Rav Huna said here, it's even to put your animal close to that partition. You can feed the animals elsewhere, but to put it in the place that it's set aside, it's an issue because people forget. So the Gemara said, "Dekaim la be'apa, ve'az la ve'achla." That he is controlling the animals. He's standing there, and he doesn't let the animal go elsewhere, and therefore he basically controls what's going on. So we derive from that the Mishnah is not allowed to take your animal and stand where is the haystack, only to direct the animal, because he block the way for the animal to go any other way. So either you go by the Mishnah Berurah that said in Shin Kav Dalet that he's not so close to the animal. There's others, but that's the Gemara continue and ask Velo yiten letoch kupato teven. So the question is, why you not allow to put the hay into his basket and feed his animal? What's the reason? Tanya, this is a picture number 273 from the Orota Daf, the bottom one picture. Everyone see it? Okay. Tanya, Bait sheben shtei chatzerot. It's two houses, and you have a house that it's built between two courtyards. Umil'au teven מערבין שניים ואין מערבין אחד. Why? זה נותן לתוך קופתו ויאכיל, וזה נותן לתוך קופתו ויאכיל. It's because what happened here is, this is the hay in between, so each person take his part and feed individually. So therefore, you have to make independent Eruv, two Eiruvin to each and every one. נתפעט התבן מעשרה טפחים, שניהם אסורים. That's exactly what you said earlier. And that's basically what the Ritva said. That the minutes this one, it's reduced from 10 handbreadth. So what happened here, you tell me.
Then it's breached, and then it becomes one Eruv, essentially.
Because it's no longer a partition
not an Eruv,
between the two entities. And all these three domains, it's considering one. And one that it didn't make an Eruv. And therefore the Ritva said the people in these two properties cannot carry them. Okay, so the Mishnah said, the Vaita said, how you fix this situation? They said, כיצד הוא עושה? נועל את ביתו ומבטל את רשותו, הוא אסור וחברו מותר. Beautiful. So basically, he locked the house that come to that yard and basically renounced his right over that domain, and therefore the other fellow can use it. וכן אתה בגוב של תבן שבין שני תחומי שבת. So he said, and it's also apply to a pit, a gov of hay that is positioned between the two Shabbat limits. So the residents of each area may feed the animals from the common hay, as there is no concern that the animal go behind the limits. And he said, Ktane mihat, and we learn further, זה נותן לתוך קופתו ויאכיל, וזה נותן לתוך קופתו ויאכיל. So he said, each of them, this one, they put his hay into his basket and feed the animal, and the resident of that courtyard put hay into their basket and feed the animal. So basically that's difficult for the way that Rav Huna's opinion. So Amrei, so we learn, זה נותן לתוך קופתו ויאכיל, וזה נותן לתוך קופתו ויאכיל. So basically each of them difference, not like Rav Huna said that you cannot take from the hay between the 2 yards. Amrei, so the Gemara responded and said, buy the house that filled of a hay, kevan de'ika tikra, because the Rashi said that you don't use the word mechitzot, but he says since they don't have a tikra, you don't have a ceiling, ki mifchit min kira lemilchta. So by the minutes that he reduce the heights of the haystack, is reduced, the matter is basically conspicuous, and therefore hachalo la min kira lemilta. Here, in regard to the hay in the pit, the difference in height is not conspicuous. So the height of the hay in the pit could become diminished to the extent that the partition is nullified without anyone noticing. נתמעט התבן מ10 טפחים, שניהם אסורים. So if the hay was reduced to less than 10 handbreadth, it's prohibited to carry in both courtyard. ה10 שערי, which means that it's permitted if the ceiling is much higher than the hay. ואף על גב דמדליה תקרא טובה, even that the ceiling is much higher than the hay, שמע מינה מחיצות, אין מגיעות לתקרה שמן מחיצות. So it means you're going to tell me that the status of the 10 handbreadth partition, that it does not reach the ceiling, is that of a standard partition, which is a subject to dispute elsewhere. So that he said, Rashi explained that from this Braita we understand that's enough that if this partition is a 10 handbreadth, to divide this property to 2 different domains, even it's not reaching the ceiling of that house. So he said, Amar Abaye Hacha bevayit 13 chaser mashu askina. We are dealing with the heights of a house that have a little less than 13 handbreadth. V'teven 10, and the hay is a 10 handbreadth high. So it means that the haystack is less than 3 handbreadth from the ceiling, and based on the principle of lavud, if you remember, we said that it has to be 3. So the concealed joint to the partition reach the ceiling. ורב הונא בן יהושע אמר אפילו תימא בבית 10, even you say that is a house that have a 10 handbreadth high, 79b, ותבן 7 ומשהו, דכל פחות מ3 כלבוד דמי. So he said that whatever it's any gap that less than 3 handbreadth is considered joint, based on the principle of lavud. So the Gemara asks, Bishlama la'abaya niktan ma'asara, l'Rav Huna b'red Rav Yoshua, ma'im ma'asara. What does that mean, that the hay is less than 10 handbreadth? So the answer is metorat asara, from the law of 10 handbreadth. So which means as long as the hay is slightly more than the 7 handbreadth high, is regard to 10 handbreadth high. That's the principle of lavud. Shne'en asuri. So the Mishnah said, the same Braita said that if the heights of the hay was reduced to less than a 10 handbreadth, it is prohibited to carry in both from the house or from the middle house to that yard. So they said, Shma minad yorin aba'in b'Shabbat asurin, that if it's a two residents coming on Shabbat, that they didn't partake of the Eruv with the others, it automatically forbids all the others to use that yard. So the Gemara said, Dilma de'imat me'etmol. So they said, the Braita referring to a case where it's already reduced on the previous day, which means before Shabbat begin. So it was never permitted to carry at all in this type of circumstance. Ketzadu oseh. What does the residents of the courtyard act to seek some permission for others to use it. So he said, No'el et beito u'mevatel et reshto. He locked his house that opened to the courtyard. He's basically renounced his right from his house to the middle house. And the Gemara asks, why tarte? Why he needed to both locking this house and also renounce his right over the domain? One of them, it's enough. They said, Hachike Amar, that's the meaning. Or No'el et beito or mevatel et reshuto. Either he locked his house or renounce his right to the courtyard. And he said, V'baitema, it's another option, another teirutz, leolam tarte. The requirement is both. Kevan the dashbei adel et, because he gets used to carry from his house to yard on Shabbat, so he come to carry even after he renounces his right. So even usually it's enough to renounce his right from the other properties. So, but the sages required to lock also his house in order to put a boundary and avoid him from making mistakes. Hu asur v'chavro mutar. One anal is right, it is forbidden for him, and it's permitted to the other person to carry. So they said, pshita, that's obvious, l'tzricha dehadar idach ubati lelechavre, that the second person came after he stopped doing all his needs in a house, and he renounced his right, returned to the first one. V'akamashman del mevatlim v'chozrim mevatlim, is come to teach us that one may not renounce his right in favor of the other, and then have the later renounce his own right in favor of the other. But that's, he can't do it. And also likewise you said in regard to a pit of hay that is situated between two Shabbat limits. So it means that the inhabitants of each area may feed their animals from common hay. So the Gemara said, Pshita, that's obvious. So it said, Lo tzricha leRabbi Akiva de'amar tchumim deoraita. So you go by Rabbi Akiva, that he said that the Shabbat limit is it's a biblical law. So therefore, he learned it from the pasuk in Bamidbar in number 35 that you cannot exceed it more than 2,000 cubits. So they said, "Ma'u deteman ligzor dil ma'atel achlufe b'kavash melaan." So he said, you may put a gzera, that the sages put a prohibition by carrying this hay, because maybe he mixed between hay, and he may take the hay that it's out of the main, that it's a biblical. So therefore, the Braita tells us that even though you don't put this decree to forbid the hay. Now, the next Mishnah, dealing with Shitufei Mevo'ot, beginning of chapter 6, if you remember, we gave introduction of Shitufei Mevo'ot. Here, the dinim, it's similar, so we use both. All the people in the alleyway, they put in one of the yards in that alleyway food that belongs to everyone. You don't need to collect from every single family. It's enough that one person put the food for everyone. כיצד משתתפים במבוי? How they merge in a courtyard that open into the alleyway. מניח את החבית. A person can place a barrel filled of his own food. ואומר, and he said, הרי זו לכל בני מבות. This barrel is for everyone in this alleyway. All the residents. ומזכה להן על ידי בנו וביתו הגדולים, ועל ידי עבדו ושפחתו העברים, ועל ידי אשתו. And basically can make the confer possession as kinyan by using either his children, his servant, Jewish servant, his wife, etc. So every one of them can partake of that Eruv. The idea of using the wife, it's a famous Gemara in Adarim, that the big question is what exactly it's her domain or not, and the Rif dealt with that, the Rambam. Anyway, but אבל הוא אינו מזכה, but he, however, cannot make a zikayon, give the confer possession, לא על ידי בנו ביתו הקטנים ולא על ידי עבדו ובשרות המנים, מפני שאדם כידו. By mean he is Hebrew slave and a maid servant whom he does not own, and by mean of his wife, these people may, he says that in not confer all these because they cannot effect acquisition as ownership of the subject that come into their possession, as if those this subject to his possession. So it means that the father, for example, cannot confer possession to the slave or minor on behalf of their acquisition.
Because all their possessions belong to him.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes. So it's yadam ki yado, that it's basically it's owned by him. Amar Rav Yehuda, now with several dinim. Number one, chavish של שיתופי מבואות צריך להגביה מן הקרקע טפח. It's important din. He says that when you do that, when you use the barrel and you're acquiring on behalf of the alleyway residents, you have to raise the barrel or 1 handbreadth from the ground. So it's a valid act of acquisition on their behalf in order to make it, it's called kinyan hagbaha. Amarava ane tartemile sabed pupedita amrinu. This is the two important halachot that Rav Yehuda said. The Gemara in Sanhedrin in 17 said that Saved Pumbedita is honorary title for Rav Yehuda. Chada. One is that you need to lift 1 handbreadth from the ground. That's 1 point. V'idach, and the second one, Hamkadesh. Im ta'am melo lugma v'yatza v'im lav lo yatza. That one who make a kiddush, what do you need to do? He needed to taste a mouthful of wine, otherwise he did not fulfill his obligations. So, few points here. First of all, the Torah said that it's a mitzvah to make to use kiddush dvarim. Zachor et yom haShabbat lekadsho. You need to express
use words
of Shabbat. So there are say that it's the biblical. Said Mikra Kodesh, it's a biblical. There are others say that it's rabbinic. Some say that even the kiddush on the cup is biblical, but drinking it's rabbinic. So now the Gemara dealt with the measurement of drinking. So again, as far as the kiddush is concerned, it's to say it in words is biblical. To drink is rabbinic. Now, how much you need to drink? So you go here by several directions. You go by the Tosfot and the Ritva, or you go by others. Tosfot and Ritva said that as long as is one side,
one cheekful.
That's the Ritva way of understanding the Tosfot. Then the measurement of the drinking, it's a machloket between Reb Chaim Naeh and Chazon Ish. Reb Chaim Naeh said that it's 86.4 cc. The Chazon Ish said it's 150 cc, the minimum requirement to drink. But the big machloket in the tour in Reish Ayin Aleph, who is exactly needs to drink. Let me share with you just for a short time the tour. It's Reish Ayin Aleph. So first, let's see the Mechaber. The Mechaber said here, I translated my very best. He said, he brings the Gemara in Yuma that said that in page 80, that put in one side of his mouth cheeks, that's fine. Then he said, the Gaonim said that he did not fulfill his obligation only if he tastes the wine. The same. וכתב עוד, איש תלי ולא תיים ושתי אחרינה, מה לקרס אחרינה ומברך בורא פרה, גם אם לא צריך לדור על הקדושה. He said if you drink it, if you give to someone else to drink, and you make the kiddush, and someone drink it, so he hold that you need to bring another cup and say just bore priagafe, not the entire kiddush. But he said, here in our Gemara said that it's enough that someone else drink it. So he said, that's applied to anything else but not the kiddush itself. But for the kiddush, only if you taste the wine. That's the mechaber. But then he said that his father said that even the kiddush, it's enough for someone else to do it. It's not preferable, it's not advisable, but it's okay. It's someone else, like one of the mesubim, one of the people around the table can do it. And he said that if the idea of melol ugmav, that either by Chazon Ish 150 or by Reb Chaim Naeh, it has to be like, let's say, about 1/3 of the kiddush cup. You take the kiddush cup, 1/3 you have to drink. So now you ask, so what about if I spread it among several people? So they said here it's not good. They said that in the whole idea of deriving joy from drinking, and deriving joy, it's drinking below lugmam. So he said, mitzvah min hamuvchar shitamu kulam. The best case scenario is that everyone should taste something. But here, the Bet Yosef brought all this big discussion, and he said, he brought the Ritva, and he disagreed with that. So I just give you the abbreviation because I don't want to digress too much with this. Mm-hmm. The abbreviation is this. The best case scenario is you make the kiddush, you drink, either you go by the Chazon Ish or you go by Reb Chaim Naeh, about 1/3 of the cup, like Reb Chaim Naeh is 86.4 cc.
cc's, yeah, that's probably closer to 1/3 of a cup.
Third of the cup, so you drink it, goodbye, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Now, that's the best case scenario, and then you take some and you put to all the mesubim, all the people, and let them drink. That's best case scenario. It's okay, according to some here, that you make a kiddush, and then the 1/3, one person, one of the mesubim drink the 1/3. That's the rosh. The Ritva said that even you spread it, the diavad, the idea of the 1/3 among several people, it's also fine. All of that the Shulchan Aruch and Orach Chaim said in Reish Ayin Aleph. But it's clear that in a cup itself, you need to have this amount of wine, the minimum wine. The big question is how you do it. So again, lechatchila, you should make the kiddush, you should drink 1/3, and then you should spread to everyone around the table. But the avad, according to some only, since it's rabbinic, etc., the drinking is rabbinic. So they say that you can make the bracha and you can give other people. The best is one person. If not, there are some who say that even you spread it among the Rosh, say that among others it's also fine. Another din from Ziknei de Pumpedita, Omar Rav Chaviva, Hanam Eisave de Pumpedita Ambrinu, Damar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Osim Medura Lechaya B'Shabbat. So here they're dealing with Yoledet, a woman that delivered the baby in those days. As we said that it was some situation that the woman in childbirth, it's very cold, etc. They need for her, for the baby, so they allow to warm water for her because otherwise her life is endangered. In those days, even you tell me that it's havara, you're not allowed to lit a fire on Shabbat, but since it's a pikuach nefesh, it's saving life. So they said in Orach Chaim, Shulchan Aruch Shin Lamed, that you're allowed to do it. Savur mina lechaya in lechole lo. Maybe you say that that's applied to a woman in childbirth, but maybe for a regular sick person, maybe not. So they said בימות הגשמים in, בימות החמה לא. So the rainy season, yes, the danger is catching cold is ever present, yes, but in the summer, no, not build a fire. So Amar Itmar Itmar אמר רב חייא בר אבין אמר שמואל הקיז דם ונצטנן הוצאים לו מדורה בשבת ואפילו בתקופת תמוז. In those days they used to take a blood and that was part of a routine that they used to do it. So a fellow was taking blood and then all of a sudden he catch cold. So you can build a fire for him on Shabbat even during the season of Tammuz, which is the summer. So Rav Yehuda is limited neither to a woman in childbirth nor to the rainy season. So he said, Amar Ameimaran, Amar Nam Esav de Pompedita Amrinu. Also the elder of the Pompedita said, the Itmar Ezo Yashirastam, it's another important point, Halacha, that we talk about that idolatry. So they use the Asherah tree. So what is which tree is presumed to be a tree designated for idolatry, the Asherah? Even no one actually saw it worship. If you see the adulterous priests, they save it, they guard it, and the fruit is not taste. So the tree, it's consecrated for the cult. ושמואל אמר, כגון דאמרי, that's the way that we said a servant, הנה תמרי לשיחה דבי נצרפי. This date of the tree, it's in order to make for that temple of Nitzrefei, which they drink on the day of festival, the Chilel B'Yom Chagam, in their festival. אמר מימר, ואמרו לסבא דפומפדיתא, הלכת עקבתי דשמואל. Basically, you go to the opinion of Shmuel. That's basically, you see these dates that they designate for their idol worshipping in their temple. Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim 372, מתבן שבין שתי חצרות. If a haystack between two courtyards is 10 handbreadth high, the resident established 2 Eiruvin. If the haystack was reduced to less than 10 handbreadth in height before Shabbat, the residents of both courtyards established 1 Eiruv. The Rosh maintained that the same halacha is effect if the haystack was reduced on Shabbat itself. It is prohibited to remove hay from a haystack 10 handbreadth high on Shabbat to feed one's animal, and it is likewise prohibited to position an animal near the haystack. However, it is permitted to stand in front of the animal so that it will go there on its own accord. If the haystack is positioned between the two houses, it is permitted to feed one's animal from it even by hand. So a person may position his animal on a patch of grass on Shabbat so that it may gaze there, but he may not place the animal on the muktzeh, on the set aside object. That's Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim 324. We also discuss al yedei mizochim. That's the Rambam Ilchot Eruvin, the first chapter. One may transfer possessions of an Eruv others by means of his wife, or if adult children, or by means of his Jewish servant or maidservant, even they are minors, and even if they eat from his table. As they can acquire possessions for themselves, they may do so on behalf of others as well. However, one may not transfer possessions by means of his minor children, who have no right of acquisition, nor by means of Canaanite slave, who has no right acquisition either, or his hands is considered like his master's hand with regard to acquisition. Some authority is used here that the Reef and others maintain that one may not transfer possessions by means of his adult children if they eat at his table, which means that he supports them financially, or by means of his wife he supported her, or by means of his daughter who has not reached maturity. So here is the long discussion. The Tur said that after the fact, the lenient opinion with regard to Eruv is accepted. Now, Keitzad Zakeh Eruv, so Rama said in Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 366, one may place a barrel of wine for a merging of alleyway or bread for a joining of courtyards, lift it a handbreadth and thereby transfer its possession to the residents of the courtyard or alleyway and all those who live with them. There is no need to inform them before Shabbat that one is transferring possession on their behalf. We talk about the obligation of Kiddush, and we said that this is Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 271, that one recited Kiddush over wine and drank a mouthful, which means most of a quarter of a log, which we said that if it's a B'Chazon Ish is 150 cc, by the Chaim Naeh is 86.4 cc, he has fulfilled his obligation with regard to Kiddush, but we have to emphasize that the blessing of Kiddush, the word of Dvarim, is biblical, the drinking of the wine is rabbinic, and the best case scenario, the best lechatchila, is a person drink, and he drink in revi'it, and then he spread the wine to all the people around the table.